Have you ever woken up next to someone thinking your life was about to get worse, only to discover it was about to change forever? This story will make you question everything you think you know about love, class, and second chances. The Seattle rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel as Emma Rodriguez slowly opened her eyes. Her head pounded like the bass at a Capitol Hill club, and for a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then she saw him. A man lay beside her in the king-sized bed, his dark hair tousled against Egyptian cotton pillowcases that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His face was turned toward her, peaceful in sleep, with the kind of sharp jawline that belonged in magazine spreads rather than her chaotic life. "Oh God," Emma whispered, clutching the silk sheet to her chest. "What have I done?" Have you ever made a decision that terrified and thrilled you at the same time? Because Emma was about to discover that sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most beautiful destinations. The events of the previous night crashed back like the tide at Alki Beach. The hotel's annual staff appreciation party. Too much champagne. Dancing until her feet hurt in borrowed heels. And this man, this devastatingly handsome stranger who'd looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. She remembered laughing at his jokes, feeling sophisticated for the first time in her 25 years. She remembered the elevator ride to his suite, his gentle hands, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. But in the harsh morning light of downtown Seattle, reality hit harder than espresso from Pike Place Market. Emma slipped out of bed as quietly as she could, gathering her scattered clothes from the marble floor. Her cleaning uniform lay crumpled by the door, a stark reminder of who she really was. Not some glamorous woman who belonged in penthouses, but a hotel cleaner from Rainier Valley who just spent the night with a guest. She dressed quickly, her hands shaking as she pulled on her sensible shoes. The man stirred but didn't wake. In sleep, he looked younger, less intimidating than the confident stranger who'd swept her off her feet just hours ago. Question for you. Would you run from the best night of your life if you thought you didn't deserve it? Emma was about to make that choice. As she reached for the door handle, she caught sight of herself in the ornate mirror by the entrance. Her reflection showed a young woman with dark hair escaping its ponytail, lipstick long gone, wearing a polyester uniform that screamed, "Help, not guest." The woman in that mirror had no business being in this room. She opened the door and slipped out into the carpeted hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The elevator couldn't come fast enough. Little did Emma know, the man in that bed was about to turn her world upside down in ways she never imagined. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the cramped bathroom of her studio apartment in Georgetown, staring at 2 pink lines that might as well have been a death sentence. The pregnancy test trembled in her hands as the sound of traffic on East Marginal Way filtered through her paper-thin walls. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. But it was happening. The nausea that had been plaguing her for days suddenly made perfect sense. The exhaustion that went beyond her usual bone-deep tiredness from 12-hour shifts cleaning hotel rooms. The way certain smells, like the industrial disinfectant she used daily, now made her stomach lurch. Have you ever felt your life split into before and after in a single moment? Emma was living with that fracture right now. She sank onto her threadbare couch, the pregnancy test still clutched in her shaking hands. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered with promise and possibility, none of which seemed meant for her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Maya, working late at the diner again. Pizza money on the counter. Emma stared at the $20 bill on their makeshift kitchen table and felt tears sting her eyes. She was pregnant with a man whose last name she didn't even know, living paycheck to paycheck in a city where a decent apartment cost 3 times her salary. But here's what Emma didn't know. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. And sometimes, That humor comes wrapped in Italian leather shoes and a three-piece suit. The next morning at the Fairmont Olympic, Emma moved through her cleaning routine like a robot. Room 247, vacuum and dust. Room 249, fresh towels and bathroom scrub. She'd managed to avoid the penthouse level for 3 weeks, but her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had specifically assigned her to the executive floors today. Rodriguez. Mrs. Chen's voice echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. Conference room cleanup. Board meeting just ended. Quick turnaround, they've got another meeting in an hour. Emma grabbed her cart and headed toward the boardroom, her stomach churning from morning sickness and anxiety. The last thing she needed was to encounter any high-level guests while she was barely holding herself together. Sometimes fate doesn't wait for you to be ready. Sometimes it just shows up and changes everything. She pushed open the heavy mahogany doors to find the conference room empty except for coffee cups, scattered papers, and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Emma worked quickly, collecting trash and wiping down the massive table that could seat 20. That's when she heard the voice that made her blood freeze. "I think I left my phone in there." Emma spun around to face the doorway, and there he was. The man from the penthouse. The father of her unborn child. In that moment, Emma realized that some secrets are too big to stay buried. He stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her car, his green eyes widening as recognition hit. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. "Emma," he said, her name falling from his lips like he'd been waiting 3 weeks to say it. I have to go," she stammered, abandoning her cleaning cart and pushing past him toward the door. "Wait." His hand caught her arm gently. "Please. I've been looking for you." Looking for her? The hotel cleaner who'd disappeared like Cinderella at midnight? "You've been looking for me?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Why?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, and Emma noticed how his suit jacket pulled slightly across his broad shoulders. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Because I wanted to see you again." Have you ever had someone say exactly what you wanted to hear at exactly the wrong time? Emma was about to learn that timing is everything. "Mr. Blackwell?" A woman's voice called from down the hallway. "The Anderson Industries team is here for the 2 p.m. meeting." Mr. Blackwell. Now she had a name to go with the face that had been haunting her dreams. "I have to go," Emma said again, but this time her voice was barely a whisper. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said urgently. "Please. There's so much I want to tell you." Emma looked into those green eyes and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. But she had news that would change everything. News that would probably send this billionaire running faster than she had 3 weeks ago. "I can't," she said, pulling free from his gentle grip. "You don't understand. I'm not who you think I am." "Then tell me who you are," he said simply. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the woman who made me believe in something I thought I'd lost forever." And that's when Emma realized that some conversations are too important to have in a hotel corridor. Some truths demand their own stage. That evening, Emma found herself sitting across from Daniel Blackwell in a quiet corner booth at Canlis, one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants. The Space Needle glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the sound of jazz piano mixed with the gentle murmur of conversations that probably involved more money than she'd see in a lifetime. She felt completely out of place in her only decent dress, a black number from Target that she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. But Daniel looked at her like she belonged here, like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. Have you ever been somewhere you didn't belong but desperately wanted to? Emma was living that contradiction. "You're nervous," Daniel observed, his voice gentler than she remembered from their night together. "Shouldn't I be? I'm having dinner with a guest from the hotel. I could lose my job just for being here." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Is that what you think this is about?" The fact that I'm a guest and you work there? Emma looked at this man who had somehow convinced her to have dinner despite every instinct telling her to run, and realized she was about to destroy whatever fairy tale he'd constructed in his mind. "Daniel," she began, her voice barely audible over the restaurant's gentle ambience. "There's something I need to tell you." "Before you do," he interrupted, reaching across the table to take her hand, "let me tell you something. That night 3 weeks ago wasn't just a random hookup for me. I know it might have seemed that way, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. About the way you laughed at my terrible jokes. About how you told me your dreams of maybe going back to school someday. About how you made me feel like myself for the first time in years. Have you ever had someone see the best version of you when you could only see the worst?" That's the gift Daniel was offering Emma, and she was about to throw it back in his face. Emma pulled her hand away, her heart breaking with every word he spoke. "You don't understand. You're romanticizing one night with a hotel cleaner who was drunk on champagne and pretending to be someone she's not." "Stop," Daniel said firmly. "Stop diminishing yourself. I don't care what your job is. You will when you hear what I have to tell you." The words hung between them like a challenge, and Emma realized there was no going back now. She reached into her purse and pulled out the pregnancy test she'd been carrying like a talisman of impending doom. She set it on the white tablecloth between them, those 2 pink lines visible even in the restaurant's dim lighting. Daniel stared at the test for a long moment, his face unreadable. The jazz piano seemed to grow louder in the silence that stretched between them. This was the moment Emma had been dreading. The moment when the fantasy ended and reality crashed down like the Seattle rain. "You're pregnant," Daniel said finally, his voice steady. "Yes. And it's mine." "Yes." Emma braced herself for the reaction she'd been expecting, the denial, the accusations, the inevitable retreat of a wealthy man who just realized his one-night stand had consequences. Instead, Daniel reached across the table and picked up the pregnancy test, holding it like it was made of precious metal. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "What? Are you sick in the mornings? Are you scared? Are you taking care of yourself?" Emma stared at this man who was supposed to be running for the hills, who was instead asking about her well-being with the tenderness of someone who actually cared. "Yes, I'm scared. I'm terrified. I can barely afford my rent, let alone a baby. And morning sickness is the least of my problems right now." Daniel nodded slowly, still holding the pregnancy test. "We need to talk about this properly. But not here." He signaled the waiter. "My place or yours?" "My place isn't exactly." Emma gestured helplessly at the elegant restaurant around them. "I don't care if you live in a cardboard box, Emma. What matters is that we figure this out together." Together. The word hit Emma like a revelation. She'd been so prepared to face this alone that the possibility of partnership hadn't even occurred to her. An hour later, they stood in her tiny Georgetown apartment, Daniel's expensive suit looking absurdly out of place among her second-hand furniture and student loan finance decorations. "It's not much," Emma said, suddenly seeing her home through his eyes. The peeling paint, the radiator that clanged all night, the kitchen that was barely bigger than a closet. "It's yours," Daniel said simply, and somehow that made it sound like the most beautiful place in the world. Have you ever had someone look at your life without judgment and see possibilities instead of problems? Emma was discovering what that felt like. They sat on her small couch, the pregnancy test on the coffee table between them like a bridge to an uncertain future. "Tell me what you're thinking," Daniel said. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's stuffiness. "I'm thinking that you're going to wake up tomorrow and realize this is insane. I'm thinking that rich men don't stick around for unplanned pregnancies with hotel cleaners. I'm thinking that I should have never told you at all." But Daniel's response would prove that sometimes, people surprise you in the most beautiful ways. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "About all of it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, setting it next to the pregnancy test on the coffee table. Emma's heart stopped. "What is that?" "Something I've been carrying around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment to give it to you." And that's when Emma realized that some fairy tales don't end at midnight. Sometimes they're just beginning. Emma stared at the velvet box like it might explode. "Daniel, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." He picked up the box, his hands steady while hers shook. "Emma Rodriguez, will you marry me?" Have you ever had your entire world flip upside down in the span of 30 seconds? Because Emma was about to learn that sometimes the most unexpected proposals come with the most unexpected truths. "You're proposing because I'm pregnant," Emma said, her voice hollow. "This is some kind of duty thing. Rich guy takes responsibility for his mistake." Daniel's eyes flashed with something that might have been hurt. "You think you're a mistake?" "I think this whole situation is a mistake. I think you're caught up in some fantasy about the mysterious woman who disappeared from your hotel room, and now you feel obligated to play knight in shining armor." But Daniel's next words would shatter every assumption Emma had made about his motives. "I bought this ring the morning after you left," he said quietly, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. "Before I knew about the pregnancy. Before I knew your last name. Before I knew anything except that I was in love with a woman who made me feel alive for the first time in years." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The ring was beautiful, not ostentatious, but elegant in a way that spoke of thoughtfulness rather than obligation. "You're in love with me? You don't even know me. I know that you work 2 jobs to support yourself and send money to your mother in Yakima. I know that you're studying for your GED at night because you had to drop out of high school to help your family. I know that you volunteer at the downtown homeless shelter on weekends, even though you barely have time to sleep." Emma's blood ran cold. How could he possibly know all of that? "How do you know those things?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "Because I had you investigated." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. "You what?" "I know how that sounds." "You had me investigated?" Emma shot to her feet, pacing the small space of her living room like a caged animal. "You hired someone to dig into my life? My family? My personal business? Have you ever trusted someone only to discover they'd been violating your privacy the entire time?" Emma was about to learn that even Prince Charming could have a dark side. "Emma, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you're a stalker? That you've been playing some sick game where you pretend to care about the poor cleaning lady while secretly investigating her background like she's a criminal?" "It's not like that." Daniel stood too, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I was trying to find you. I didn't know your last name, and I didn't know how to contact you. I asked the hotel for your information, but they wouldn't give it to me for privacy reasons. So you hired a private investigator instead of just leaving me alone like a normal person would." The hurt in Emma's voice was raw, unguarded. For a moment, she'd believed in something beautiful. Now she felt like a fool. "I couldn't leave you alone," Daniel said desperately. "I tried for 2 weeks to forget about you, to go back to my life, but I couldn't. You changed something in me, Emma. You made me remember what it felt like to connect with someone real." "Someone real?" Emma laughed bitterly. "Is that what this is about? The rich boy wants to play with the authentic poor girl? See how the other half lives. Stop putting words in my mouth. Then tell me the truth. What did your investigation reveal? That I'm exactly what I appear to be, a broke 25-year-old with no education and no prospects? Did that make me more or less appealing to you?" Daniel's answer would either redeem him or destroy any chance they had at a future together. "It made me realize that you're the strongest person I've ever met," he said quietly. "And it made me understand why you ran that morning. You think you don't deserve good things." Emma felt tears threatening to spill over. "Maybe I don't. You deserve everything." Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You deserve someone who sees your worth. You deserve security. You deserve love. And you deserve to know the truth about who I really am." And that's when Daniel revealed the secret that would change everything Emma thought she knew about their situation. "My name isn't Daniel Blackwell," he said. "It's Daniel Blackwell Morrison. I'm the CEO of Morrison Industries." Emma's world tilted. Morrison Industries was one of Seattle's largest tech companies, headquartered in the gleaming towers of South Lake Union. She'd seen their logo on buses, billboards, and coffee shops across the city. "You're the Morrison heir," she whispered. "I'm the Morrison seal. But more importantly, I'm the man who fell in love with you in one night and has been trying to find his way back to you ever since. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought was out of your league was actually playing in a completely different universe?" Emma was about to learn that sometimes reality is stranger than any fairy tale. "This is insane," Emma said, sinking back onto the couch. "You're one of the richest men in Seattle. You could have anyone. Why me?" "Because when I'm with you, I'm not the Morrison heir or the CEO or the guy who's supposed to have all the answers. I'm just Daniel. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough." The ring box still sat open on the coffee table between them, the emerald catching the light from her cheap lamp and throwing rainbows across the walls. "I can't marry you," Emma said finally. "Because of the investigation?" "Because of everything. The money, the lies, the investigation, the fact that you're proposing because I'm pregnant with your child. None of this is real, Daniel. It's all fantasy and obligation and guilt." But Daniel's next revelation would prove that some fantasies are built on foundations more solid than Emma ever imagined. "There's something else," he said. "Something the investigation revealed that you don't know about yourself." Emma looked up at him, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the evening. "What now?" "Your father wasn't just some guy who abandoned your mother. His name was James Morrison. He was my uncle." The silence that followed was so complete that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're not just Emma Rodriguez, hotel cleaner from Yakima. You're Emma Morrison Rodriguez and your family. You're my cousin." And that's when Emma realized that some fairy tales come with plot twists that would make Shakespeare jealous. Emma's world spun like a broken compass as Daniel's words sank in. "That's impossible. My father died when I was 2. My mother said he was killed in a construction accident." Daniel sat down beside her carefully, as if she might bolt at any sudden movement. "He was killed, but not in an accident. James Morrison died in a car crash while driving to see your mother. He'd been trying to convince my grandfather to acknowledge you and your mother, to bring you into the family. Have you ever discovered that your entire life story was missing crucial chapters?" Emma was about to learn that sometimes the truth is stranger and more wonderful than any lie. That can't be true. My mother would have told me." "Your mother was 19 and terrified. My grandfather, our grandfather, was a ruthless old man who saw your mother as a threat to the family's reputation. He paid her to disappear, to never contact the family again. She took the money because she needed to survive, but she told you your father was dead because in every way that mattered, he was." Emma's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them still. "Prove it." Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. A young man with her eyes and her stubborn chin, standing next to a woman who looked exactly like Emma's mother had 25 years ago. "My God," Emma whispered, tracing the screen with trembling fingers. "He looks like me. You have his eyes. His determination. His tendency to disappear when things get complicated." The accusation in Daniel's voice was gentle but pointed, and Emma realized he was right. Running away was her default setting, just like it had been her father's. "If this is true," Emma said slowly, "if I'm really a Morrison, then we're cousins. Second cousins, actually. It's legal if that's what you're worried about." Emma laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "Legal? Daniel, I'm worried about the fact that I just found out my entire life is a lie. I'm worried about the fact that I'm pregnant by a cousin I didn't know existed. I'm worried about the fact that apparently I'm part of some family that's been pretending I don't exist for 25 years. But Daniel's next revelation would prove that the Morrison family had been doing more than just pretending she didn't exist. "You're not just part of the family, Emma. You're an heir. When my grandfather died last year, he left instructions in his will about finding James's daughter. He'd spent the last decade of his life trying to make amends for what he'd done to your mother." Emma felt like she was drowning in information. What kind of amends? 25 years of compound interest on what should have been your father's inheritance, plus your share of Morrison Industries stock, plus a trust fund that's been growing since the day you were born. The numbers Daniel quoted made Emma's head spin. Generational wealth that could change not just her life, but her children's lives, their children's lives. "How much?" she whispered. $47 million. Emma's cheap lamp flickered, as if the universe itself was reacting to the impossibility of what she'd just heard. $47 million, she repeated numbly. "Give or take a few $100,000, depending on the stock market." Emma looked around her tiny apartment, at the second-hand furniture, the peeling paint, the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter, and started laughing. Not gentle laughter, but the kind of wild, uncontrolled sound that borders on madness. "This is insane," she gasped between fits of laughter. "This morning I was a pregnant hotel cleaner who couldn't afford groceries. Tonight I'm a multi-millionaire heiress engaged to her secretly rich cousin. This is like the world's most messed up soap opera. Have you ever had a day so surreal that you wondered if you were dreaming?" Emma was living that uncertainty. "Emma," Daniel said gently, "you haven't said yes to the proposal yet." That sobered her instantly. "Because I still don't understand why you want to marry me. Is it because I'm pregnant? Because I'm family? Because I'm supposedly rich now?" "Because I love you," Daniel said simply. "Everything else is just details." But Emma had learned too much about secrets and lies and hidden motives to take anything at face value anymore. "How do I know that's true? How do I know this isn't all some elaborate scheme to keep the Morrison fortune in the family? Marry the lost heir, control her inheritance." Daniel's eyes flashed with hurt. "Because you know me, Emma. You might not have known my real name or my family history, but you know who I am. You know how I make you feel. You know what we have together." And that was the question that cut to the heart of everything. Did Emma trust her instincts about Daniel, or did she trust her fear? She looked at him sitting on her threadbare couch in his expensive suit, holding a ring that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life, telling her she was rich and loved and worthy of fairy tale endings. "I need time to think," she said finally. "How much time?" "I don't know. This is all happening too fast. 3 weeks ago I didn't know you existed. Tonight I find out I'm pregnant, rich, related to you, and apparently engaged. I can't process all of this at once." Daniel nodded, and Emma could see him forcing himself to be patient when every line of his body suggested he wanted to push for an answer. "What do you need from me?" "Space. And maybe some proof that all of this is real and not some elaborate hallucination brought on by morning sickness." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. My lawyer's information. Call him tomorrow. He'll explain everything about your inheritance and walk you through the legal documents. He can also arrange for a paternity test if you want confirmation about the baby. The practical offer grounded Emma in a way that all the romantic declarations hadn't. This wasn't just about feelings, there were legal realities to navigate. And if I decide I don't want any of this, the money, the family, the proposal, then you don't want it. The inheritance is yours regardless of what happens between us. You could take the money and disappear tomorrow, and I'd never bother you again. Emma studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. You'd really let me walk away with $47 million? It was never mine to begin with. It's yours by right. That answer told Emma more about Daniel's character than any romantic gesture could have. I'll call your lawyer tomorrow, she said. But Daniel? Don't expect an answer about marriage anytime soon. I need to figure out who I am before I can figure out who I want to be with. Daniel stood, straightening his jacket with the unconscious grace of someone born to wealth. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. As he headed toward the door, Emma felt panic flutter in her chest. What if this was all a dream? What if she woke up tomorrow and none of this had happened? Daniel, she called out. He turned back, hope evident in his green eyes. Thank you. For finding me. For telling me the truth about my father. She gestured helplessly at the ring box still sitting on her coffee table. For all of it. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. After he left, Emma sat alone in her apartment, staring at the pregnancy test and the engagement ring, two small objects that represented the complete transformation of her life. She picked up the ring box and opened it, watching the emerald catch the light. For just a moment, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to say yes. To trust in love and possibility instead of fear and self-doubt. But that decision would have to wait until tomorrow. Tonight, Emma Rodriguez, or Emma Morrison Rodriguez, was going to sleep on it. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The offices of Brennan, Walsh and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of Columbia Center, with views that stretched from Elliott Bay to the Cascade Mountains. Emma felt underdressed in her best business attire, a navy blue dress from Target that she'd bought for job interviews, as she sat across from Thomas Brennan, Esquire. Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Brennan said, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. Or should I say Ms. Morrison? I've been waiting 25 years to have this conversation. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone knew secrets about your life that you didn't? Emma was about to discover that sometimes the truth has been waiting for you longer than you've been alive. Emma opened the folder with trembling hands. The first document was a birth certificate, not hers, but her father's. James Morrison, born September 15, 1970, in Seattle, Washington. Father, Robert Morrison. Mother, Eleanor Morrison. Your grandparents, Mr. Brennan explained gently. Robert passed away last year, but Eleanor is still alive. She lives in a care facility in Bellevue. She's been asking about you. The idea that she had a grandmother, living family beyond her mother, hit Emma like a revelation. She knows about me? She never stopped looking for you. When your mother disappeared with you in 1999, Eleanor hired private investigators to try to track you down. But your mother did an excellent job of staying hidden. Emma thought about their nomadic childhood, the way they'd moved from town to town, the way her mother had always paid in cash, the way they'd never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. Mom was running from them, Emma realized. Your mother was protecting you from Robert Morrison, Mr. Brennan corrected. He was not a kind man. Eleanor, on the other hand, has been heartbroken for 25 years. Have you ever discovered that your family history contained both villains and heroes, And you'd only known about the villains? The next document in the folder made Emma's breath catch. A trust fund document, established September 15, 1999, her second birthday, in the amount of $2 million. Your grandfather set this up the day after your father's funeral, Mr. Brennan explained. It's been growing for 25 years. The current balance, with compound interest and investment returns, is $47.3 million. Emma stared at the number, trying to process what it meant. This has been sitting here all along? Waiting for you to turn 25 and claim it. Which you did 2 months ago. 2 months ago, Emma had celebrated her 25th birthday by working a double shift and eating ramen noodles for dinner. If she'd only known. What about Morrison Industries stock? Mr. Brennan smiled. That's where things get interesting. You own 12% of Morrison Industries, making you the third largest shareholder after Daniel and his mother. Your annual dividend payments alone are worth approximately $3.2 million. Emma felt dizzy. $3 million a year? Just for owning stock. Just for being a Morrison. The absurdity of it all hit Emma like a wave. She'd been scrubbing toilets for minimum wage while sitting on a fortune that could buy hotels. There's more, Mr. Brennan said, pulling out another document. Properties. Your grandfather left you several pieces of real estate, including a house in Magnolia, a cabin on Whidbey Island, and a small commercial building in Pioneer Square. I own real estate? You own quite a bit of Seattle, actually. Emma leaned back in the leather chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what she was learning. Her entire understanding of herself, her family, and her place in the world was being rewritten with each document. Mr. Brennan, she said slowly, why didn't anyone try to find me sooner? If my grandmother was looking for me, if there was money waiting for me, why did it take Daniel's investigation to make this happen? The lawyer's expression grew serious. Because Robert Morrison made sure that any official attempts to find you would fail. He sealed records, paid off officials, created legal barriers. It was only after his death that we were able to begin undoing the damage he'd done. The magnitude of what her grandfather had stolen from her, not just money, but family, belonging, identity, was staggering. Can I see her? My grandmother? She's been hoping you'd ask that. I can arrange a meeting whenever you're ready. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. Daniel, how's the meeting going? Do you need anything? She stared at the message, remembering his proposal, the ring still sitting on her coffee table at home, the baby growing inside her that connected her to him in ways that went beyond family trees and corporate inheritance. Mr. Brennan, she said, what happens if I marry Daniel? Does that affect my inheritance in any way? Not at all. Your inheritance is yours, regardless of your marital status. Though I should mention that if you do marry Daniel, you'd become one of the most powerful couples in Seattle's business community. The idea of being powerful, of having influence and resources and choices, was still foreign to Emma. But it was becoming less terrifying and more intriguing. I have one more question, Emma said. Daniel's proposal. Do you think it's genuine, or do you think there are business motivations I should be worried about? Mr. Brennan leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. I've known Daniel since he was a boy. I've watched him turn down dozens of advantageous marriages, business partnerships, and social connections that would have benefited Morrison Industries enormously. If Daniel wanted to marry for business reasons, he's had plenty of opportunities that would have been far more lucrative than marrying you. That's actually reassuring. Ms. Rodriguez, may I speak frankly? Emma nodded. I've seen Daniel conduct a lot of business over the years. I've never seen him investigate someone the way he investigated you. Most of his business decisions are calculated, strategic. But his search for you? That was desperation. That was a man who'd found something he couldn't bear to lose. Sometimes the most important truths come from neutral observers who have nothing to gain from their honesty. Emma left the lawyer's office with a briefcase full of documents, a key to a house in Magnolia she'd never seen, and a head spinning with possibilities. But before she could think about any of that, she had a phone call to make. "Mama," she said when her mother answered on the second ring. "We need to talk." Some conversations can't wait for convenient timing. Some truths demand immediate attention. 3 hours later, Emma sat in her car outside the small house in Yakima where she'd grown up. The paint was peeling worse than she remembered, and the front steps sagged under the weight of years and deferred maintenance. But it was home. Her mother, Maria Rodriguez, opened the door before Emma could knock. At 51, she still had the same delicate features Emma had inherited, but 25 years of keeping secrets had carved lines around her eyes. "Mija," her mother said, pulling her into a hug that smelled of vanilla and worry. "Feel pale. Are you eating enough? Have you ever been about to have a conversation that would change your relationship with someone forever?" Emma was walking into that moment. They sat at the kitchen table where Emma had done homework and eaten countless meals, where her mother had stretched every dollar to make sure they survived. "Mama, I know about my father." Maria's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. "What do you know?" "I know he was James Morrison. I know he died in a car crash on his way to see you. I know you took money from his family to disappear." The silence that followed was heavy with 25 years of carefully guarded secrets. "Mija," her mother said, pulling her into a hug that smelled of vanilla and worry. "Feel pale. Are you eating enough? Have you ever been about to have a conversation that would change your relationship with someone forever?" Emma was walking into that moment. They sat at the kitchen table where Emma had done homework and eaten countless meals, where her mother had stretched every dollar to make sure they survived. "Mama, I know about my father." Maria's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. "What do you know?" "I know he was James Morrison. I know he died in a car crash on his way to see you. I know you took money from his family to disappear." The silence that followed was heavy with 25 years of carefully guarded secrets. Maria set down her cup with shaking hands. "Who told you?" "Daniel Morrison. James's nephew. The father of my baby." "You're pregnant?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Mama. And he's asked me to marry him." Maria stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. No, you can't marry into that family. You don't know what they're capable of." Emma watched her mother's reaction and realized that some wounds never fully heal, they just get better at hiding. "Tell me what happened, Mama. The real story." Maria sat back down, suddenly looking older than her years. "I was 19, working as a secretary at Morrison Industries. Your father was 28, the youngest son, the one who wasn't supposed to inherit anything significant. We fell in love, but his father, Robert Morrison, was a monster." Emma reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "What did he do?" "When he found out I was pregnant, he offered me money to disappear. When I refused, he threatened to destroy me. He said he'd make sure I never worked again, that he'd have me deported, that he'd take you away from me the moment you were born." The pain in her mother's voice was fresh despite the decades that had passed. "But Daddy was coming to see you when he died. James was going to confront his father, to demand that Robert acknowledge you and me. He said he'd rather lose his inheritance than lose us." Maria's voice broke. "He died on Highway 2 in the rain, driving too fast because he was angry." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. Her father had died fighting for them. After the funeral, Robert came to see me himself. He said James's death proved what happened to people who crossed him. He put a suitcase of cash on this table and said it was the only money I'd ever see from the Morrison family. He made me sign papers promising never to contact them again. The image of her young mother, alone and terrified, facing down a powerful man who just lost his son, broke Emma's heart. "How much money, Mama?" $50,000. It seemed like all the money in the world at the time. Emma thought about the $47 million waiting for her in Seattle, about the dividends that could have supported their family for generations. Her grandfather had cheated them out of more than money. He'd stolen their dignity, their security, their choices. "Mama, there's something else. I have an inheritance. From my father's side. It's substantial." Maria looked up sharply. "How substantial?" $47 million. The number hung in the air like something too large to comprehend. "Dios mío," Maria whispered. $47 million? Plus stock in Morrison Industries. Plus real estate. Plus annual dividends worth millions. Emma pulled out the legal documents. "It's all here. It's all real. And it's all mine." Maria stared at the papers like they might disappear if she looked away. "What does this mean?" "It means we never have to worry about money again. It means you can retire, travel, live anywhere you want. It means I can give my baby everything we never had." But Emma could see the fear in her mother's eyes, the terror of someone who'd learned that Morrison money came with Morrison consequences. "And Daniel? What does he want from you?" Emma told her mother about the proposal, about the investigation, about the night that had started everything. When she finished, Maria was quiet for a long time. "Do you love him?" her mother asked finally. "I think so. But I don't know how to trust it. I don't know if what I feel is real or if I'm just overwhelmed by everything that's happening." "And what does your heart tell you?" Emma thought about Daniel's gentleness, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious, the way he'd offered her space and time even when she could see how much he wanted an answer. "My heart tells me he's a good man. But my head tells me this is all happening too fast, that I'm making decisions based on emotions instead of logic." Maria reached across the table and cupped Emma's face in her hands, the same gesture she'd used to comfort her daughter through scraped knees and broken dreams. "Mija, I spent 25 years teaching you to be afraid of the Morrison family. But maybe not all of them are like Robert. Maybe some of them are like your father." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that fear kept us safe, but it also kept us small. You have a chance at something I never had, the chance to choose love without losing everything else." That night, Emma lay in her childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to the ceiling when she was 12. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "How did it go with your mother?" "No pressure, just checking in." She typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "It went well. She told me about my father. I understand more now." His response came immediately, "I'm glad. He would have been proud of you." And in that moment, Emma realized that some connections transcend time and circumstances. Some love stories begin before the lovers ever meet. The next morning, she drove back to Seattle with her mother's blessing and a heart that was finally ready to take a chance on happiness. The Sunset Hill Care Center in Bellevue looked more like a luxury hotel than a nursing home, with manicured gardens, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of understated elegance that whispered of serious money. Emma stood in the parking lot, clutching a bouquet of white roses and trying to calm her racing heart. "You don't have to do this today," Daniel said gently. He'd offered to drive her, and Emma had surprised herself by accepting. "I need to do this," Emma replied. "She's my grandmother. She's been waiting 25 years to meet me." Have you ever been about to meet family you didn't know existed, carrying the weight of decades of separation and secrets? Emma was about to discover that some reunions are worth the wait. Eleanor Morrison was waiting in the sunroom, a small woman with silver hair and eyes the exact shade of green as Daniel's. She wore a pale blue cardigan and pearls, and when she saw Emma, her face transformed with joy so pure it took Emma's breath away. "My dear girl," Eleanor whispered, rising from her chair with surprising grace. "You look just like your father." Emma had prepared herself for awkwardness, for the difficulty of connecting with a stranger who shared her blood. She hadn't prepared for the immediate sense of belonging she felt when Eleanor wrapped her in arms that smelled of lavender and love. "I'm sorry," Emma said, surprised to find herself crying. "I'm sorry it took so long." "Hush, child. You have nothing to apologize for. You're here now, and that's all that matters. Sometimes family isn't about the years you've shared. It's about the recognition that happens in an instant." They sat together on a comfortable sofa overlooking the gardens, Eleanor holding Emma's hands like she was afraid she might disappear again. "Tell me everything," Eleanor said. "I want to know about your childhood, your mother, your dreams. I want to know who you've become." Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, telling Eleanor about growing up poor but loved, about her mother's sacrifices, about her own struggles and small victories. Eleanor listened with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. "Your mother did well," Eleanor said when Emma finished. "She raised a remarkable young woman under impossible circumstances." "Grandmother," Emma said, testing the word on her tongue, "why didn't you try harder to find us?" Eleanor's face grew sad. "I tried, dear. For years I tried. But Robert controlled everything. The money, the lawyers, the investigators. Every lead I pursued seemed to vanish. It wasn't until after he died that I realized how thoroughly he'd sabotaged my efforts." The extent of Robert Morrison's cruelty was becoming clearer, and Emma felt a surge of gratitude for her grandfather's death that shocked her with its intensity. "But you never stopped looking?" "Never. I had investigators searching public records, school enrollment files, and employment databases. The day Daniel told me he'd found you was the happiest day I'd had in 25 years. Daniel had been quietly listening from a chair nearby, giving them space to reconnect. Now Eleanor turned to him with a knowing smile. "And now he's found you in more ways than one, hasn't he?" Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He told you about the proposal?" "He asked for my blessing first. Very proper of him, considering you're carrying his child." Emma's mouth fell open. "He told you about the pregnancy?" "Daniel tells me everything important. And you, my dear, are the most important thing that's happened to our family in decades." Emma looked at Daniel, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I thought she should know. She's going to be a great-grandmother." "I hope she's going to be a great-grandmother to legitimate children," Eleanor said pointedly. The old-fashioned concern in Eleanor's voice made Emma smile despite herself. "Grandmother, I haven't said yes to his proposal yet." "Why not?" Emma had been asked that question a dozen times over the past few days, but hearing it from Eleanor, from family, made her examine her reasons more honestly. "Because it's all happening so fast. Because I'm afraid I'm making decisions based on circumstances rather than feelings. Because I don't know if I can trust that his love is real." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. "May I tell you something about your father?" Emma nodded. "James was the most romantic fool who ever lived. He fell in love with your mother the day he met her, and he spent 6 months trying to work up the courage to ask her out. When he finally did, she said yes, and he came home talking about marrying her." Emma could see Daniel shifting uncomfortably in his chair, clearly recognizing similarities between himself and his uncle. "I told him he was being ridiculous," Eleanor continued. "I said he barely knew her, that he was confusing infatuation with love, that he should take his time and be practical. Do you know what he said?" "What?" "He said, 'Grandmother, when you know, you know.' And I know." The words hit Emma like a revelation, not because they were particularly profound, but because they captured something she'd been afraid to acknowledge. 3 months later, they were engaged. 6 months after that, you were on the way. It was the fastest courtship in Morrison family history, and it was also the happiest marriage I'd ever seen. Emma looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw something she'd been too scared to recognize before. Not just attraction or obligation or circumstance, but genuine, bone-deep love. "Grandmother," Emma said slowly, "what if I mess this up? What if I'm not good enough for this family?" Eleanor laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Child, you are this family. You're a Morrison by blood and a Rodriguez by upbringing. You've got strength in your bones and kindness in your heart. You're exactly what this family needs." That evening, Daniel walked Emma to her car in the parking lot of the care center. The Seattle skyline glittered across Lake Washington, and the air smelled of rain and possibility. "She likes you," Daniel said. "She likes the idea of me. She likes having family back." "She likes you," Daniel repeated firmly. "And she's not easy to impress. Trust me, I've been trying for 30 years. Emma turned to face him, this man who'd turned her world upside down and somehow made it make sense for the first time in her life. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. If I weren't pregnant, would you still want to marry me?" The question hung between them like a bridge, and Emma held her breath waiting for his answer. "Emma, if you weren't pregnant, I'd still have proposed 3 weeks ago. I'd still be carrying that ring around, waiting for the right moment. I'd still be completely, hopelessly in love with you. And if I wasn't a Morrison? If there was no inheritance, no family connection, no money? Then I'd love a hotel cleaner named Emma Rodriguez who makes me laugh and challenges me and sees through all my bullshit to whoever I really am underneath." Emma searched his face for any sign of deception and found only sincerity. "I have one more question." "Okay. Will you ask me again?" Daniel's face lit up with understanding and hope. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the familiar velvet box, dropping to one knee right there in the parking lot of a Bellevue nursing home. "Emma Morrison Rodriguez," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Will you marry me? Will you let me love you and our child for the rest of our lives? Will you build something beautiful with me?" And this time, Emma didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Daniel slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, Emma realized that some fairy tales don't happen in ballrooms or castles. Sometimes they happen in parking lots, with traffic humming in the distance and your grandmother watching from an upstairs window, applauding with tears in her eyes. 6 months later, Emma stood in the living room of the Magnolia house she'd inherited, a craftsman bungalow with views of Puget Sound and enough character to make up for its need for updating. Her pregnancy was showing now, a gentle curve that Daniel liked to rest his hand on when they sat together in the evenings. "Are you sure about the wedding venue?" Daniel asked, looking up from wedding magazines spread across the coffee table. "We could have it at the Fairmont. Full circle and all that." Emma wrinkled her nose. "I don't want to get married where I used to scrub toilets. I want something that's ours, not somewhere that reminds me of who I used to be." Have you ever wanted to celebrate how far you've come while still honoring where you started? Emma was learning to navigate that balance. "What about here?" Daniel suggested, gesturing toward the large windows that framed the sound. "In the garden. Small, intimate, just family and close friends." Emma considered it. The house had good bones, and they'd been slowly renovating it together, stripping wallpaper, refinishing floors, turning it into a home that felt like both of them. "My mother would love that," Emma said. "She could see the mountains from here. She always wanted to live somewhere with mountains." "Speaking of your mother, how's she adjusting to retirement?" Emma smiled. After Emma had claimed her inheritance, The first thing she'd done was pay off her mother's mortgage and set up a trust fund that would ensure Maria never had to worry about money again. The second thing was to convince her to quit her job at the cannery and come to Seattle. She's taking a cooking class at Seattle Central. Says she wants to learn to make something fancier than rice and beans for the baby. The transformation in her mother had been remarkable. Watching someone who'd lived with financial anxiety for decades finally relax into security was like watching a flower bloom. Emma's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, grandmother." "Hello, dear. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just wedding planning." "What's up?" "I have a proposition for you. Actually, it's more of a request." Emma had learned that when Eleanor Morrison made requests, they were usually worth listening to. "I'm listening. I'd like to give you your father's ring. The one Robert took from him after he died. I thought perhaps Daniel could use it in the ceremony." Emma's breath caught. "You have Daddy's ring?" "I've been saving it for 25 years, hoping someday I'd have someone to give it to. It seems like the right time." The idea of carrying a piece of her father into her marriage, of connecting past and future in such a tangible way, made Emma's eyes well up with tears. "I'd love that, grandmother. We both would." "Wonderful. I'll have it sent over this afternoon." After Eleanor hung up, Emma told Daniel about the ring. His reaction was immediate and emotional. "Your father's ring," he said softly. "And that's incredible. You don't mind? Using a family ring instead of buying something new?" "Mind? I'm honored. It means we're not just starting something new, we're continuing something that mattered." That afternoon, a courier arrived with a small package. Inside was a simple gold band, worn smooth by years of wear, with an inscription inside, "For Maria, with all my love, James." Emma held the ring carefully, imagining her father wearing it, imagining him planning a future with her mother that had been cut tragically short. "He loved her," Emma said wonderingly. "Just like I love you," Daniel replied, and Emma knew with complete certainty that her father would have approved of her choice. The wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon in the garden of the Magnolia House. Emma wore her grandmother's pearls and her mother's lace, carrying white roses that matched the ones growing wild along the fence. She'd chosen not to have anyone walk her down the aisle. Instead, she walked alone, carrying the strength of all the women who'd helped shape her toward a future she was choosing for herself. Daniel waited for her under an arch of Pacific Northwest greenery, wearing his grandfather's cufflinks and her father's ring. When their eyes met, Emma felt the rightness of the moment settle into her bones. Sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that take you home to yourself. The ceremony was small, just family and a few close friends. Emma's mother cried happy tears in the front row, while Eleanor watched with the satisfaction of someone who'd lived long enough to see endings become beginnings. When the officiant asked for the rings, Daniel reached for her father's band with hands that only trembled slightly. "With this ring," he said, his voice carrying across the garden, "I promise to love you with the same devotion your father showed your mother. I promise to build a family with you that honors both where we come from and where we're going." Emma's own vows were simpler but no less profound. "Daniel, you found me when I was lost, and you helped me find myself. You showed me that love doesn't have to cost everything. Sometimes it gives you everything. I promise to build a life with you based on truth, trust, and the certainty that we're better together than apart." When they kissed as husband and wife, Emma tasted salt from tears she didn't remember crying and felt the future settle around them like a blessing. 1 year later, Emma Morrison Blackwell stood in the nursery they'd created in the Magnolia House, holding her 3-month-old daughter, Isabella Rose. The baby had Daniel's green eyes and Emma's stubborn chin, and she slept with the complete confidence of someone who'd never known a day without love. Through the window, Emma could see Elliott Bay stretching toward the Olympics, ferries crossing like slow-moving dreams. The view was spectacular, but what made it beautiful was the knowledge that it was theirs, not because they'd inherited it or bought it, but because they'd chosen to build something meaningful here. Have you ever held everything you didn't know you wanted and realized it was exactly what you needed? Emma was living that gratitude. Daniel appeared in the doorway, home from his office at Morrison Industries, where Emma now served on the board of directors. They'd used her inheritance to start a foundation focused on supporting single mothers and children in poverty, giving other families the opportunities Emma and her mother had never had. "How are my girls?" he asked softly, crossing to wrap his arms around both of them. "Perfect," Emma replied, leaning back against his chest. "Your grandmother called. She wants to babysit this weekend so we can have a date night." Does she realize that babysitting involves actual babies, not just the idea of babies? Emma laughed. She hired a night nurse for backup. Apparently, Eleanor Morrison doesn't do anything halfway. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, each lost in their own thoughts about the impossible journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked. "The simplicity of before?" Emma considered the question seriously. Their life now was complicated in ways her old life had never been: board meetings and charity galas, investment decisions and family obligations. But it was also rich with possibilities and purpose. "I miss the clarity," she said finally. "When you're poor, your goals are simple: survive, pay rent, hope for better. Now there are so many choices, so many ways to make a difference, that sometimes I feel overwhelmed by the responsibility. And then I remember that overwhelmed is a luxury. It means I have options. It means our daughter will have options. It means the choice between struggling and thriving isn't really a choice anymore." Daniel kissed the top of her head, and Emma felt the contentment that came from being exactly where she belonged. "I love you, Mrs. Morrison Blackwell." "I love you too, Mr. Morrison Blackwell." Outside, Seattle hummed with the energy of ambition and possibility. Inside the house in Magnolia, a family slept peacefully, dreaming of futures built on foundations of love, truth, and the radical belief that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary destinations. And if you looked closely at the nightstand in the master bedroom, you might notice two objects sitting side by side: a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, and a photo of a young man and woman from 26 years ago, both smiling with the kind of joy that transcends time. Some love stories end with happily ever after. Others begin there. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances and unexpected miracles. Because sometimes the person who changes your life isn't who you expected, and sometimes that's exactly what makes it perfect. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had an encounter that seemed insignificant at the time but changed everything? Have you ever discovered that you were worth more than you believed? Have you ever taken a leap of faith that seemed terrifying but led to something beautiful? Your story matters. Your worth is real. And your happily ever after might be closer than you think. Subscribe for more stories that remind you that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings start with the scariest endings.